Good morning and good afternoon. This is Kendall Coffey. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to join you in this very important conference through a video recording. As matters developed, I have to be in court at this very same time, but it was important to be able to talk to you about some of these issues, and I do want to thank Katya and her colleagues for allowing me to do this. Just a little bit of brief background. I was at one time the United States Attorney for South Florida, meaning in charge of the largest federal prosecution office in the country. Since then, I was involved in heading a commission to select federal judges, and I also have the privilege of teaching law at 3 different law schools locally. One of the courses I've taught is international litigation, and that will be among the topics that I would like to share with you. What I think is important to address is the law of the United States with respect to assets of foreign governments, and in some cases, foreign individuals who are wealthy but may not be obeying our laws and have substantial assets here. Let's start out with the public aspects of the law and what is the role of the government. As I think is well known, there are close to 40 billion assets that are blocked or can be described as frozen of the Central Bank of Russia in the United States. And that is part of a total of 300 billion in central bank assets that are frozen or blocked throughout the world. It is a very important question right now how, if at all, those assets should be deployed to assist in the rebuilding of Ukraine. We are told in the United States that the cost of rebuilding so far, and heaven forbid that the damage keeps getting worse, but so far it's already $600 billion. So there will be a desperate need to find funding in that order of magnitude, and one of the most logical places that many are looking at are the assets, the frozen assets of Russia and of its oligarchs. In the United States, there is a disagreement right now at the highest levels of our government as to whether the United States government, through the executive branch, which is, of course, headed by Joe Biden, our president, can simply go to the frozen or blocked assets and confiscate them, use existing powers of the United States government with respect to these assets and take them and redistribute them to Ukraine, either to the government of Ukraine or to Ukrainian victims. That is a view that some hold, but there are others, including the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, who believes that legally the U.S. can't go that far. Yes, we can issue orders with respect to sanctions and other components that have the effect of freezing the money in place. But according to her and some other responsible authorities, we don't yet have the power to simply take that money and in effect send it overseas back to Ukraine. If there were a will in the United States Congress to pass laws allowing that specifically to be done, I think those laws would be allowable and constitutional. And there's already efforts in the United States Congress to put forward a law along those lines. But whether it's surprising or not, you might know that there are some different voices on that. One of the concerns Secretary Yellen has raised is that it would reduce the willingness of other countries to rely on the U.S. dollars. There's also a question of whether or not, if we were to take the money and send it to Ukraine, whether that would eliminate a bargaining chip. And when I say bargaining chip, I'm referring to language from a U.S. Supreme Court decision, a bargaining chip that the U.S. might want to use if there ever were a chance of a settlement of a peace between Ukraine and Russia. In 1981, the U.S. Supreme Court held that the U.S. had the power to redistribute frozen bank assets from Iran and use it as a bargaining chip in connection with the release of U.S. hostages. It goes back a lot of years, but it was a very painful thing for the United States in the late 1970s when Iran took control of our embassy and turned our embassy personnel, military personnel, other U.S. personnel into hostages for many days. And the Iranian bank assets that were frozen at the time were used potentially as a bargaining chip in that release. So there are some counter pressures for the U.S. in terms of deciding simply to take the money and send it to Ukraine for its own rebuilding. I think that that is still overall a concept that is pretty popular within the United States government. Hasn't happened yet, but something we should look at very closely. In addition to talking about what the government can do, an important question is, what can victims do? And there are so many victims of such horrors, murdered children, destroyed cities, so many things that could be brought into the court, that this is also going to get